What's good, everybody? My guest today is Kevin Warner. He's the founder and CEO at Leadium, which provides dedicated sales resources who acquire targeted prospects, design account-based sales campaigns, and convert prospects into qualified sales appointments. Kevin, welcome to the Goats of Growth.
Jay, it is great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's just start with what I just ended with. Tell me a little bit more about Leadium and the value proposition that you offer your customers.
Yeah, Leadium is in this fast growing space of sales development agencies. It wasn't as fast growing when we started in 2014. So we've definitely been a long standing player in the space. But essentially, more and more companies understand the advantage of top of funnel and how sales can lead to instant activity, getting in front of your decision makers and your ideal accounts quickly, not necessarily waiting for marketing to pick them up in their orbit, but actually just picking up a phone, sending an email, and communicating in real time. So that SDR function is one we're becoming more and more normalized in the B2B space. And companies like ourselves said, hey, what we're able to do is we understand the channel really well. We understand strategy and segmentation. We understand where data exists and how to best utilize it. We understand that copy matters, the types of messaging, the types of phone call scripting, as well as the actual SDR activity itself. So we're kind of coming in as a full service agency to say, let us focus on driving the pipeline. Let you focus on closing that pipeline into realized revenue, and we can kind of become an agency of record. So we can stay at the forefront of strategies of deliverability, which is becoming more and more of a behemoth, and all of that, which takes a lot of financial resources and a lot of financial risk for a company to run internally. We can take that risk off of their shoulders and kind of provide a full encompass suite of services.
Let me ask you, because you started off by alluding to the crowded space, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, when you started, maybe not as crowded. How do you then, frankly, as a pro at this, right, differentiate yourself? Because you mentioned, writing the copy and scripting and that type of stuff. So as you're putting your own messages together for Leadium,
Yep.
In a crowded space, what are you doing to help you, stand out and acquire new customers for Leadium?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll answer it on two parts. One is we've been very fortunate that we have never had to do outbound ourselves, and it's weird that we're an outbound agency and we just don't have to do it ourselves. And I think that's just it leads to how long we've been doing it, our reputation in the space, our size in the space, that a lot of companies come and seek us out now. That doesn't mean that we can't win a deal, because it is a crowded market. A lot of companies are prospecting, are selling appointment setting services, are undercutting pricing. The way we stand out a bit differently is, one, we approach outbound very strategically. So when we're selling into a company, we have to understand what is out. This is not just setting appointments. And while that seems very simplistic, we have to stay true to how are we? What's the strategy? How are we optimizing that? How are we looking at the analytics? How are we testing different messaging? Most companies don't have a good idea on what go-to-market messaging works or doesn't work. So before I ever pitch an idea of we're going to set an appointment, what we say is, look, we're going to build an enterprise-grade SDR, outbound program. If you do have a good product market fit and you do solve the problems that you say exist in the market, then you will get appointments from it. Appointments are a byproduct of all of the other work. So we never sell appointments. We sell the strategy, we sell the consistency, and you have to have a purposeful kind of ideologic thinking on what is outbound, how does it work, and kind of how do you approach it that you really pitch to clients. And from that, I think what you end up doing is you get them to trust, which we're an agency, so oftentimes we're selling on trust. You get them to trust that, hey, you know what you're doing, and we trust that.
That brings up another question, because frankly, that's how I often have to sell as well. I'm providing a service. Nobody's downloading any demo or, anything like that, right? And so I do sell on trust. So I guess maybe this is a selfish question, but when you engage with a new prospect, and you aren't tying it to appointment setting, but you're really selling a strategy and a program,
Yep.
if you will, right? How do you inspire trust in that? What are some of the things that you're thinking about and going through?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we've gone through our iterations over the last 8 years. And do we scale up, scale down, scale up? We're a people as a service business. So I remember in 2015 talking to an investor when you built the company hoping, hey, maybe we'll get investment, and you watch the tech company. And what you quickly realize in an agency is no, that's not the same game that you're going to be playing. And I remember one investment conversation, they said, if I bring you 100 customers tomorrow, what do you do? And the answer was, we'll take five of them because all we can support today is five of them. And he said, well, that's not a very investable business. If I can't scale my bottom line with you guys by adding fuel to the fire, what do you need an investor for? And that was kind of our aha moment of, hey, we're in this for the long run. And that's how a lot of agencies are built and function. We kind of model ourselves very closely to how a top marketing agency might do client relationships and execution, etc.
Hmm.
But that was always at the forefront. So we have tried to push the limits and scale, and revenue's a goal, and let's just bring in more revenue. Because we're a sales business, what we realized through that was we're successful with as much expertise and experience that we can provide each client. Meaning, if we're building outbound campaigns, we need to understand different products, different product industries and market fits. And, we have a pharmaceutical client, and then we have a tech startup that's dealing with HR to, other startups. Those are categorically different ICPs and different markets, but how do we as an agency understand the mechanics of both of them so that we can provide a great service? That takes a skill set, and that skill set in sales, which is the unfortunate thing, is hard to hire for, because if you're good at sales and if you're good at pipeline creation, you're usually wanting to do sales, and you usually want to be an account executive, and you're getting paid good money to do it. And as an agency, we can't afford you because it messes up our margins. So what we've decided to focus on is, let's be boutique. Even though we are a big player in the space, even though we've been here for so long, let's stay small. Let's stay founder-led sales. Let's stay boutique. Let's stay where our client experience, you're managed by a partner and a founder of the business. That limits us to how much growth we can have, but we kind of shifted our goals as an agency, and we say, well, we're not chasing $20 million in annual revenue. We're chasing five. And at five, that's a great lifestyle company where we have great relationships, great results, and we can be still at the forefront of everything we do. So we had to have that kind of fundamental shift of, who do we want to be and how are we going to get there? And that's just how we've gone about a little bit differently.
And is that so? Linking it back to the trust, then what I'm hearing is that obviously you're not. Let's say, I hate to use this word, but you're not. Let's just use the word delegating. You're not delegating it out to someone who or at least is managing the account, to someone who might just be just out of school, or maybe doesn't necessarily have the knowledge and expertise or care that you do, or one of the other partners in the business. Is that fair to say, in terms of just where you're building your trust initially on those initial meetings?
That is fair to say. One is, you're probably going to clip this part, but I'm going to stand up, and for the sake of whoever's editing, we'll clip this. Let me motion censor my office lights.
Okay, fair enough. That's okay. Most people will hear this. Most people will be listening to this anyways, not seeing it. So,
Exactly. So we'll motion sensor those lights for the sake of it. It might happen again, but that's exactly right. So how we're getting trust is, we're not delegating the parts that we can't delegate. I am joining any second sales call where we think is a good client fit. I am joining it. One of my business partners is managing the most of the strategy, especially in the early months. So without delegating it, we limit the capacity that we can bring in, which is what we like, is that boutique approach. But you're also trusting that, hey, I'm dealing with not only business owners, because you could start a new agency pretty quickly and still be doing founder-led sales, but business owners that have a track record, have been doing this for almost a decade now, have a good brand behind them, who decidedly made it a boutique agency, and I'm dealing directly with them. So this isn't a fly by the night type of operation. we kind of have a name and prestige behind it. And for us, we do it one more layer besides that. And very early on, we wanted to focus on brand. And so we also, in every aspect of your relationship with us, from sales to execution, we have it modeled as, well, we want to be the Deloitte of the space. And essentially what that means to us is there's a certain atmosphere. We come to meetings dressed right. We have our briefcases. We have our presentations. There's a certain decorum in our meetings, and strategy and outline and communication after the meetings. So you know that you're actually doing business with a buttoned up, well put together company, which just instills trust when comparing other options in the market.
I wonder, most of my clients are, technology companies, often venture-backed technology companies who aren't that way, right? In other words, they don't come to the meetings necessarily, or wouldn't expect people to become buttoned up. Or is that something that you find? Because you mentioned one's a pharmaceutical company, one can be HR tech. I know with as I just alluded to, I focus only on one, industry at large, right? Hyper growth technology companies, and I made that choice as a service provider because for me it's very difficult to get deep knowledge and understanding of multiple industries, right? And to the point what you were just saying about scale, it's very hard to forget about industry knowledge, but to pivot and go towards and focus your brain on another industry and another person's problem, where I'm much better at saying, okay, you need an account executive for a HR tech company. Yeah, that's fantastic. We just did 6 of those yesterday, right? So it's like, it's easier for us to do that. So how do you sort of assimilate when you are going from, pharmaceutical to high tech and, briefcase or not?
Yeah, this is where that expertise comes in handy. So what we say is, how we see Outbound, this is an acquisition channel, and probably an acquisition channel that should sit under marketing as of 2023. I remember back in the day in 2020 or 2016, 2017, that was the big talk, is outbound sales. Is it a marketing function or a sales function? And at the time, everyone says sales function. I think it's developed into a marketing function. So when you think about outbound sales, you have email, phone, and LinkedIn. The average prospect today engages with those 3 channels very differently from one prospect to the next. Meaning you might be somebody highly involved in email, somebody else enjoys cold calls because maybe it's an older age bracket, maybe a certain industry or a certain persona within a company that prefers phone calls. That you got to look at every one of those piece deals, much like marketing does when you're running a Facebook ad. You're segmenting down not just the demographic you're targeting, but also what do they like? What are their dislikes? Where are they located? If they're located in, Southern California, you might be showing, LeBron shoe ads, versus in Boston, you're going to be showing somebody else's ads. So you're looking at all those different, analytic traits as well. We see outbound very much the same. You have email, phone, and LinkedIn. Email, phone, and LinkedIn is the same structure for every company. Whether it's you, me, a multi-billion-dollar company, email, phone, and LinkedIn function the same. So now you got to look at, well, what's changing? The end users are changing and the value propositions are changing, but all the mechanics stay the same. Where Leadium does really well is, look, we know the mechanics of outbound. We know how to engage and get impressions with your customers based on the value propositions you're saying you have. I don't need to be an expert in your space, because by all means, email is 3 sentences. I don't need to be an expert to write 3 great sentences. I need to understand how email is absorbed and kind of responded to. Same with phone. With phone, you get 2 minutes, a minute. You get an opener, what's your go-to, what's your call to action. You got to hope that you get that long. If you look at phone analytics, probably a 5% connect rate. So if you're calling 100 people, you're connecting with 5, and you might get one of them who has the time of day to give you a conversation. So you don't need to have a pitch that's a minute long. You need to understand the mechanics of the pitch. Again, what's the hook? You still have to solve a problem. I can't do that for you. If you're a company, I have to know that what you're bringing to the table is a solution or a product that solves a problem that's actively being felt by the market you're selling into. If you don't categorically do that, you're never going to create pipeline. So for us, we're able to shift from one industry to the next and be very agnostic because we understand the fundamentals of outbound. And it's the same why a marketing agency can create a Facebook or an Instagram or a TikTok ad for you without needing to know in-depth product knowledge or market fit. It's because, hey, there's a headline, a byline, a call to action, and a graphic. We need to segment that as much as possible so that we increase the conversion rates. And if we don't segment it, that's the worst. So you have to understand that. So I think that expertise that we're bringing allows us to kind of go from one to the next.
You mentioned enterprise. Thank you for explaining that. You mentioned enterprise grade SDR program. Unpack that for me. What does that mean?
Yeah. So if you're thinking about enterprise grade today, that means what are you putting into it? So it's not just hiring an SDR and saying go and hope it works. Like maybe a lot of small, medium-sized businesses are confronted with. Do we hire an SDR or do we hire an agency? It's not just hiring an SDR. It's what's their tech stack? What's their training? A lot of SDRs are entry level. That's just the reality of it. If you're getting a non-entry level SDR, then they're most likely not joining your company. They might be joining a different type of company. So most are entry level who don't have a lot of sales expertise or experience. There's call reluctance when it comes to phone calling. So not only are you hiring an SDR, you need to ramp them pretty quickly because an average tenure of an SDR, according to the Bridge Group, is 11 to 13 months. I think they also say it takes about 3 months to fully ramp a rep. So you get 7 to 10 months of productivity, but that's if you have a good management and system in place. Imagine if you don't have a good system. So not only do we come in and we say, hey, we can build the strategy of who are we targeting. We can break down your ICP and segment it further to best utilize outbound as a channel and be as personalized as possible based on your segments. We can source the data, but also that person who's doing the activity, we kind of hire specialized resources. So we have SDRs who handle email, SDRs who handle phone, and SDRs who handle LinkedIn because we see those as 3 different skill sets. And so we focus on one person becoming an expert at phone. And typically, if you like cold calling, you like cold calling. You don't want to do email and try to figure out that game. You just want to be calling. So we specialize our resources. And in the end, what a company has felt is a high quality activity, email, phone, LinkedIn, driven by an experienced SDR rep who's managed and trained daily and weekly and kind of continues to push the bounds of their knowledge. Great campaigns, great validated data that's becoming more and more readily available, but still expensive on great enterprise tech, a tech stack. We use Apollo.io internally, Apollo Outreach Sales Loft. That's an enterprise level tool. So we take on all of that cost and all of that kind of deliverable to drive what you would ideally build internally, but takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of human capital as well.
Let me zoom all the way back out and get to know you a little bit, Kevin, from the beginning, if you will. In other words,
Yeah.
how did you get to Leadium? Let's just start there. Give me the journey.
No, it's a great question. So I was always a political science guy out of college. I worked on Capitol Hill for 2 years in campaign finance for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and very quickly realized politics is not where you want to be because it's a dog eat dog. I think what we know today, which was not as evident back then, is, hey, this is all about money. It's all about campaign financing. It's all about cold calling. Believe it or not, as much outbound as I know today, it's all started there with call lists and senators calling for dollars. That led to the tech world. So that was 2011, 12. I happened to get picked up in a very growing mobile app development tech world back then in New York and San Francisco. I was always on the product development and success side of those tech startups, though. After a couple failed, one listed on NASDAQ and we went out of business 2 years later. I realized, hey, who cares how good your product is and who cares about the client services end of it? If you don't have sales, you don't have revenue. If you don't have revenue, you don't have a company. Even if sales outpaces product, which most of the time it does, you have to have sales. That kind of defines everything. So that was just the perfect timing in 2014-15 when sales tech was exploding. I met a few co-founders. We founded a company today called Science. technology, which is still a competitor today. We exited, myself and a couple co-founders from there, we exited in 2016 to start Ledium just because we wanted a little bit more boutique. We wanted just as much consultative as execution, which is very different than the machine we built at Science. So we exited Science and then started Ledium. And ever since then, it really, that pivotal moment of sell the product, not just focus on building it, since I was always on the building side, really led into perfect timing with this explosion of sales technology. And really, what we found when we started our first company was we're not techies. Well, we don't know how to code. We don't know how to take advantage of this exploding sales market. But what we do know is how can we use all of this tech to kind of bring an advantage to a company who might not know how to use all this tech or that this tech even exists. And that's kind of the space we play in still to this day.
What was your challenge with Science's business model? Because you said that you wanted to do it
Yeah.
in a different way. Why did you put it
It,
that way?
when we started Science, our whiteboard, kind of how we want to build it, is kind of like the McDonald's in the market. So we were still very early in, and we said we want to be big. Let's create it to be the McDonald's. And the idea was you have to have a conveyor belt. So every client in, here's the service you get. No matter if you're this or that client, here's the service. So we still have that today. And I argue that that works. And I have a lot of love for what we built at Science. Um, uh, and it still works. I still argue that as much people think that McDonald's isn't a good hamburger, it is still eaten by hundreds of millions of people on an annual basis. Like, it is still a global recognized hamburger place. And while you might not like it, it is great. Like, a lot of people do love it. And that doesn't mean it's good or it's bad. That just means it works really well for a lot of companies, that conveyor belt kind of structure. What we said was we don't want to go too far from it. We're not kind of revolutionizing it. When we started Ledium, we said we just want to be the Five Guys or the In and Out. We just want to be a
Mm-hmm.
better quality. We still have to follow a lot of the processes that we built when we were there, and those fundamentals of, hey, you do need structure on how do you onboard a client? How do you activate tech stacks? How do you deactivate them if a client leaves? How do you optimize the process of launching? We just want to be a little bit better product with a little bit better outputs. So we just kind of, that's where we left and created kind of that Five Guys aspect. Maybe eaten by less people for sure, understood. Maybe has whatever, however you want to compare it. That's kind of why we left and what we built there.
I love those examples. And by the way, every first Monday of every month we eat McDonald's here. So
Yeah, exactly. It works great. And that's what
yeah.
we loved about that system was, hey, Outbound was growing so quickly. When it works and you're not going to cancel it. When it does it, you're going to cancel fast, but the market's so big that who cares, just move on. And that's still true today, even with what we're doing. Hey, the market is so fast. When it works, but we just wanted to focus on, hey, who's launching the campaigns? We don't want to just launch that's hope and prayer that it works type of campaign. We want to launch the best campaign we think is possible day one, which increases the potential odds of renewal for each client. So we don't want it just to be that you have a good product market fit and it doesn't matter what emails you send is what retains you as a customer. We wanted it to be a byproduct of kind of the expertise that was going into the campaigns.
All right. I have several follow-up questions here. I'm trying to think which one to ask next. Just so you're interesting to me because you're not a sales guy, right? You didn't come from sales, but yet here you are running Ledium, which is ultimately to
Selling
generate
all
sales.
day.
Right?
I know,
Yeah,
it's
right.
crazy.
Exactly. So I guess what gave you the gumption, I guess, if you will, to go from product to, oh yeah, sure, I can be on the front lines and sell this stuff to, frankly, salespeople. But then I'm also, I guess, I'll add this to the question, which is I'm trying to figure out how you actually think and process information. I could imagine your own internal playbook if you will,
Yeah.
or structure, or the operating system at Leadium. Frankly, as a service provider, I would love to see. So just
Yeah.
take me inside that. Like, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with your product brain, but just sort of marry those two for me.
Yeah, we
Or
often
help me.
say that it's a love-hate relationship we now have with sales because it's almost like Groundhog's Day. We're stuck in this top of funnel nightmare that a lot of companies are, we need appointments, and it's the process, and it's the process. That's the nightmare we live, which
Yeah.
is a great nightmare. We happen to be really good at it, so it's hard to then argue. It also creates a great life for us, so it's hard to complain about. It is
Hmm.
weird because I wasn't from sales. I never got in sales, never been an account executive before we owned our own business. We started sales at the kind of onslaught of becoming an SDR for one business and then two businesses and then three businesses. And what we learned really well was how to be an SDR. Now, inherently through that, you learn then how do you do founder led sales so that you can continue to close accounts, which inherently you become an account executive. But our 10 years of experience in account executive is selling for ourselves, even though we wish we could sell for clients because a lot of them have issues with their account executives. But yeah, it is that weird world of we do so many sales for so many different clients. It puts us into this weird mindscape of, man, we've worked with over 750 companies just at Leadium alone, not including what we did at Science, and some great experiences, some bad experiences, some great product market fits, some bad product market fits. Some of the largest enterprise businesses that you can think of, from Microsoft engaging agencies to small tech companies. So that interesting dichotomy, I think, is what just gets us excited because as founders and entrepreneurs, what we didn't like, I think, leading into our first company was the static of you're doing one product or you're selling one company. And if we couldn't create our own tech company, then at least we can, invigorate our minds by trying to solve a lot of different problems and problems that are changing every day still to this point. Having the product background has definitely helped with what is the process that we have to put in place, because that's where you inherently win as an agency is know that you can't sign every client. Know that, I mean, just last month, after 4 weeks with a client, we had to give a refund and say, hey, we're parting ways because your expectation of what we're going to deliver is not in path with what we're going to deliver. And yes, we could service you just fine. However, it doesn't follow our process. You're asking for communication processes that go outside of what we do. You're asking for this. And what we've learned really well is that distraction or disruption actually hurts everything else. It's that conveyor belt mindset of, as soon as you ask for a custom burger we don't make, who's going to do it? What's the next part or the next piece? Who's going to put it together? Does that take that resource away from what they're doing? So having that productized customer success mind, it allowed us to focus on the client experience, how we perceive the client experience. Knowing that we're not always going to deliver pipeline. How does a customer leave saying, hey, you did everything you could have potentially done, it just didn't work in the constraints that we had within this agency relationship? So it's this weird world we definitely live in, which is sales all day, every day. We've gotten really good at what we do as well, which is an advantage and a disadvantage because it means that we're stuck in this sales world we created as well.
How do you, this is going to get like in the weeds, but I love getting in the weeds, but how do you put together your own conveyor belt? In other words, that operating system that I just alluded to, your blueprint, your standard operating procedures. Like, is it do you get into Notion or Google Doc, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
or you're wireframing it out, and you're saying, okay, this is the first thing that happens, this is the next thing that happens, and all that.
This is where having a good partner team works really well. So I am a product guy. So we spend so much money on R&D, you can't imagine it. So if you think about how many sales tools do you test? How many licenses have you activated? Everyone. If there's a sales tool that exists, we've tested it in one way or another just to see what does it do? Can it help our system or hurt our system? Can we put it in? Because again, we're not developing our own tools. we need to stay at the forefront of outbound. We need to be cognizant of what tools exist and analyze them in a way of, does it help really drive what the goal we're working towards? Can it optimize what we're currently doing? So we spend a lot on R&D because I personally come from a product mindset, and I was on the product development teams of certain products in the past at tech or early stage tech companies. I can process those very quickly. So that's my advantage. One of my co-founders, he's great when it comes with outbound strategy, and that's a world he plays in. He doesn't understand the API calls and connecting this system to that system. He understands how to put a value proposition together, how to engage an end user on phone, how to analyze open rates, response rates, call connect rates in order to determine what we need to optimize. But having a product mindset really lets us break down the tools. Having that R&D mindset also allows you to realize, hey, in the last 2 to 3 years, there's so many open APIs from all of these tech companies that you can build your own workflows and your own systems all within the APIs of the tools, so that you never actually have to log into that tool. You can access their APIs and build out your own custom workflows, whether it be in a Google Sheets, whether it be in a ClickUp. You can use multiple tools and drive one data center. And for us, the way we operate is, how do we do that for 60, 70? If it's 120 customers, how do you build a single workflow using a single set of APIs and tools so that you can actually improve your internal processes to maximize time? So if you think, let's just use a round number, if you have 50 clients, I can't spend all day logging into 50 instances of Outreach or Apollo or SalesLoft. But how do I then feed it into a single system? How do I manage emails? How do I manage cold calling across clients? And then how do I do reporting? So that constant R&D allows you to really understand, hey, what are the apps? What are the functions? What's the new tools that we might be able to leverage? And there's a lot of times, and we're at the size now where, and to your point on the last question, we've been doing this for so long, we're almost like the old grumpy people in the room, where it's, hey, we just created this awesome new sales tool, and we can break it down and say, like, hey, I would love to have it, just not worth our time. I think the amount of lift it might be able to drive isn't worth the amount of effort as an agency to try to optimize that across or integrate that across all of our tech stack that we do internal. It also means that we have to have really good partnerships with the products that we do use. I think in outbound, I think we're going back to this mindset of growth hacking, and you probably see it in a lot of early stage agencies where it's like, hey, let's just growth hack. Apollo gives you unlimited data, just scrape all the data. Yeah, that goes against the T's and C's. A lot of what you do on LinkedIn goes against the T's and C's. I'm not going to ruin our client's experience because I get blocked because of one client. So we won't go against T's and C's, and we do, like, we won't create fake personas on LinkedIn because we believe in the value of that network. So there's a lot of things that we stand by now, just having built this program as well.
Tell me how your business is either helped or impacted by this when things get slow, when the economy is the way it currently is right now. Here we are, March 21st, 2023.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate reality. When the economy goes bad, our business goes up. So do we cheer for a bad economy? No. Do I think it's an interesting, like, do I think that the SDR space or the sales development space was overinflated? Yes, I think it was well overinflated. I think an entry level, a 1 year out of college person making $80,000 OTE in sales is absolutely absurd because you don't have a clear value on what that ROI is on the business. So you're kind of hiring to keep up. It's almost like the housing market. I just need to buy it because it's going up and up and up. I just need to get in now, which keeps pushing the pricing up. So it was overinflated for so long, especially in the SDR space, that you just see, yeah, there are layoffs now, especially in sales, but I think it's just coming back down to reality. For us, our business does well, because what a company needs inherently is revenue to operate. You need business, you need sales. You now have to understand the risk of, hey, you have X amount of finances available. Where do you put it? And what's the most chances to get revenue with the least amount of risk? So you're doing mitigation. We essentially allow you to unlock a lot, from tech to data to outbound activity, at a fraction of the cost of just a resource, not necessarily all of the additional. So we technically do well in down periods, because one thing doesn't change. You need business, you need sales, you need leads to drive sales. And it just becomes harder to do with an internal team. So for us, it's oftentimes an increase in demand in sales, but it's also become such a competitive market that for the past 8 years, we haven't seen a decrease in our own pipeline. I think it's only what's happening now. It's spreading outside of the industries you might first think about. Tech is the easiest one. We think we live in this tech bubble a lot of times. Our best clients are untraditional B2B companies, you know, pharmaceutical, where it's notoriously B2B, but a great product market fit. There's a demand that's always built in. It's a transactional community, even with high ticket values. But a lot of times it's outdated with how they do B2B and the strategies they do B2B. So if you think outside of the tech bubble, 90% of B2B businesses are small, medium sized businesses not in tech. And they don't even know what an SDR is, but they have a good product market fit. They just need leads, and they wouldn't even think about hiring an account executive. They might still be doing, founder led sales. So I think, it's leading into a bigger market for us as well.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm certainly in that tech bubble because when you were talking about the tech stack and not knowing, what tools should be in the tech stack, and going, who doesn't know what needs to be in the tech stack? I'm like, these are high tech companies. Of course they do. But you're right. When you talk about more traditional, B2B sales motions, they don't. They're not thinking that way. A lot of these folks, frankly, are part of the tech stack. Right.
Well, I grew up in Orange County, California, and it's oftentimes like the Orange County bubble. And I got out when I went to college, and it's oftentimes like, oh, you got out of the bubble, because it is. A lot of times you grow up there, you go to school there, you raise a family there, and it is its own like Laguna Beach bubble very much. And if you can get out. And the problem becomes you keep surrounding yourself with people in that bubble. So in the tech space, which we're all just so accustomed to, and it's all you see on LinkedIn, well, it's because it's all of your connections on LinkedIn. Why would you be connecting with people outside of the space that you sell into and, your peer group? So you can't step back and realize, wait a second, with the millions of B2B businesses that there are, they're not in the tech space, even though that gets a lot of times the PR and the publicity and the this and that. It's the small, medium-sized businesses that do so much. I mean, think about how many companies are selling advertising to your local lawn company, or your pool cleaner might be trying to find a Google review partner to help them increase their SEO on Google reviews locally. They might be engaging somebody locally in your region for marketing services. They don't even know what LinkedIn is a lot of times. We have a lot of clients who their ICP doesn't even exist on LinkedIn. So what do you do there? And so that bubble a lot of times is, well, you don't even realize that there's this whole other, larger market that exists outside of what we live.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And you also confirm. I asked that question about help or impact negatively because candidly have a friend who is a chief marketing officer at one of your competitors, and we see each other at our kids' soccer games. We coach basketball together, and that's exactly what he just said too. When things get slow out there, we get really, really busy. So yeah, that corroborates that for sure. He wasn't just BSing me.
No, not BSing. And for us, like that's where we love where we play, because for us, we do month-to-month agreements, and we don't do month-to-month agreements because we need a sale. We believe, hey, we're a sales team at our heart, at our core, and you might have quarterly goals, biannual goals, monthly goals. This might be an initiative now that changes next month. You might not have a closed won revenue to attribute to the cost we're putting in. So for us, it becomes, are you realizing value from it? If the answer is ever yes, you're getting more value than the cost, you would never shut us down. I'm confident in what we can do in month to month. So that, again, that's a low risk. And hey, the down market, we need X pipeline. How can I engage something that drives the best chance to generate pipeline with the least amount of risk? And in a down market, you're trying to mitigate that long-term risk.
Yep, for sure. That makes sense. Ready to get into the rapid fire five?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. All right. All right. All right. Let's see. Hold on. Now I have to find the. Oh, yeah. First question. What motivates you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Rapid fire. Oddly enough, and this is probably not the best answer, but for myself and my co-founder, we share this. We just want to be the best in the industry we're in. We want to be seen as that leader, and that's probably our primary motivation.
Name a big goal you have right now and when you would like to accomplish it.
Yeah, I'll do one personal and business. One personal, it's getting back into the housing market. So we sold our family home, when the market was at its height this past summer, and now it's how do we get back into it? All the stuff that we work towards. What is it going towards? And then in terms of business, we want to analyze the potential of a strategic sale to a PE firm and what that might look like and what additional resources could be unlocked for our clients if we can become a part of a larger family.
When is that? Can you put a date on that, or at
Oh,
least
that's
a
within
goal?
12. I mean, ideally within 12 months.
Okay. What's your most preferred way to learn new information to stay sharp?
Yeah, mine is absorbing in real time. So whether that's reading, whether that's activating licenses to tech tools, I am a visual doer learner. So I can't necessarily sit back and read or absorb on. I need to be doing to kind of get that best learning.
I am right there with you. Interesting. How many hours of sleep do you average per night?
Myself, I'm at the 8 to 9. Now that I'm getting older and older, I would say that when we started the company, I was probably on the 4 to 5 track. But now that we've just become a little more established, I luckily get 8 to 9, and sometimes that doesn't feel like enough.
Wow, that's not like me. What's your favorite thing to do when you aren't working?
Golf is right up there. Anything sports related, typically, whether it's basketball, golf, tennis, watching sports, whether it be the Commanders or F1 and Mercedes. Sports related is usually my get out. Outside of sports, and obviously the family thing, which is that always that answer. Probably reality. I'm one of those reality TV buffs, whether it be Real Housewives or whatnot. And I think the reason for that is it takes me out of the reality of sales and like revenue and pipeline, and it's just this world of just drama. And it's just such a good change to remove yourself from business and revenue and projections to let's see who like let's complain about how the steak wasn't cooked enough. And how is that even a complaint in today's world? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you there for sure. For sure. One bonus question that comes from another guest, a previous guest, and then I'll ask you what question you would like to ask my next guest, who will likely be a revenue leader in a
Okay.
tech company. All right. But you can ask anything. I mean, so people have asked, what's your walk-up song?
Yeah.
If you could buy a sports franchise, what would it be? So anything. This question is, what's the best book you have read within the last year that you'd recommend?
That is a great question. I have like the worst answers to these questions because I sadly do not read books. I know it's like the worst answer as like an educated like
Well,
senior.
the funny thing is, I kind of anticipated that because you just said that you're a doer learner, so to speak, and visual and that type of stuff. So, all right, so let me ask you.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah, you
reframe
gotta
it.
do.
What's the best piece of information you did learn, um, and within the last year,
No, that's good.
and where did you learn it?
I think in the last 2 months, I would probably say really when we analyze outbound and how this whole sales pipeline, it was human. I have a good friend at Humantic today, a guy named Colin Mitchell. who
I
really got
know.
me introduced to Humantic and AI personality data, which really opened the mind to, hey, of course, prospects in outbound and in sales, we're used to selling the same to everybody, send the same email to multiple personas within the same company. And we always thought about selling to the company and not the individual, even though sales is still very much a human driven activity between two people. And I think realizing, hey, the psychology behind each person, and we consume text differently. We just went about how I don't necessarily read books to absorb knowledge, but how do you read text? How do you absorb it? If I were to write to you, what personality trait, what style would you acknowledge? If I'm on the phone with you, should I be calling people who are more closely identified with my personality trait, because there's a better chance that we can hold a conversation and I can pitch you? So why is a 22-year-old calling a 52-year-old CRO? Should I have somebody on my team who's maybe 45, who is like-minded, has like personality traits? Maybe you're not on the same career trajectory, but you're at the same place in life and you can talk to each other and share those commonalities, because sales is still that one-to-one human aspect. Having that understanding of like AI, and or not AI, but just personality data, and how that knowledge can actually increase your conversion rates in sales, because it kind of puts a different tool in your hand, was kind of eye-opening when you analyze it against what we do, which is pipeline generation. And wait a second, I don't think anyone's accounting for that right now, but you should be, because it's no different than Nike tailoring an ad for an 18-year-old versus a 65-year-old. Of course they are. Of course, it's a different demographic. Of course, they're changing everything about that ad. But in sales, we haven't done that. And that was that aha moment of like, wait a second, why aren't we?
Yes, that's right. That's right. And I've got 2 minutes, and then I have to get ready for my next call. So we're gonna squeeze these last 2 minutes in, which is, what question would you like me to ask my next guest?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would ask, why do you do what you do today? Like, what's the goal? Like, is there a purpose behind it? And what is that reason? And we get that a lot with, why did we start this company and what do we want from it? So I'm always intrigued as, hey, 8 years in, we still ask ourselves, what do we want from this company? What do we want to do? Where do we want to go? So it's an intriguing question to self-analyze.
I love it. That question of why is ever ever present for sure. Why do you do what you do? For sure. Matter of fact, I think I posted about something like that recently on LinkedIn. One last question, and most important question for our listeners, which is, how can folks reach out to you to maybe ask you a question, follow up with you, say thank you, perhaps even be a Ledium customer at some point?
Yeah, our email, Ledium.com, is the easiest place to get a hold of us at Ledium. My email is Kevin@Ledium.com as well. LinkedIn's probably the easiest place to get in front of me quickly and start to build that kind of professional relationship, which is just Kevin Warner on LinkedIn.
Yep, for sure. The Kevin Warner at Ledium. Kevin Warner, thank you for doing this and participating on the Goats of Growth.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody. I'm cueing the music.